I was standing in the center of a $50 million ballroom, holding a stack of cheap paper napkins like a hired servant while my mother-in-law told her friends I was too unpolished to sit at the main table. She didn't know the napkins were mine. She didn't know the table was mine. And she certainly didn't know that by the time the sun rose over Lake Tahoe, I would own every single room her family had ever slept in. For 10 years, the Caldwells treated me like background noise, a sweet, basic engineer who was lucky to have merit into their name. But they forgot one thing. Engineers don't just build systems. We know exactly how to dismantle them. This isn't just a story about a resort. It's a story about the moment the invisible girl decided to stop being the help and started being the storm. If you've ever been made to feel small in your own home, listen closely. Because tonight, the power is shifting. My name is Nina Caldwell. I'm 35 years old, and for the last decade, I have been the lead systems architect for high-speed rail networks across the Pacific Northwest. I deal with complex, multi-billion-dollar infrastructures, PLC systems, and safety protocols that keep thousands of people alive every day. I am a woman of logic, precision, and immense patience. But to the Caldwell family, I was just Ben's quiet wife. Every summer, like clockwork, the family gathered at the Clear Pines Resort in Lake Tahoe. It was a place where old money went to breathe, all hand-carved timber, crystal chandeliers, and fireplaces that smelled like expensive scotch and unowned confidence. And every year, I was expected to play the role of the humble addition. I remember our third summer there. Darlene, my mother-in-law, had organized a lakeside brunch. I had spent the morning helping the catering staff set up, mostly because I enjoyed the work more than the small talk about yacht clubs. When I finally went to sit down, Darlene touched my arm with a smile that never reached her eyes. "Oh, Nina, honey," she whispered. "We're a bit tight on space at the main table. Would you mind helping the girls in the kitchen with the extra mimosas? You're so handy with that sort of thing." Ben, my husband, sat right there. He was a brilliant professor, a man of letters and ethics. Yet he sat there and said nothing. He didn't see the insult. He didn't see the way his mother was slowly eroding my dignity. "She means well, Nina," he'd tell me later in our room. "She just thinks you're more comfortable being active. You're so independent, after all." Independent. It was the word they used to justify neglecting me. I realized early on that I was a ghost in their kingdom. So, I decided to build a kingdom of my own. While the Caldwells were busy posting photos of their second homes and bragging about their new Teslas, I was living a double life. I worked 60-hour weeks. I took on private consulting contracts for international transit authorities. I lived on a fraction of my salary, driving a 10-year-old sedan and wearing clearance rack blazers while my sister-in-law, Lauren, spent more on a single handbag than I spent on a month of mortgage payments. They thought I was struggling. They thought Ben was taking care of me. They didn't know that 7 years ago, I had started an anonymous holding company, Clear Pines Hospitality Group. I started small, a boutique hotel in Portland, a strip of vacation rentals in Bend. I learned the hospitality industry the way I learned engineering, from the ground up. I learned about occupancy rates, asset liquidation, and the subtle art of the hostile takeover. When I heard that the Clear Pines Resort was quietly looking for a buyer last year, I knew it was time. The resort was the crown jewel of the Caldwell family's social life. It was where they held their weddings, their funerals, and their ego-stroking retreats. Darlene believed she practically owned the place because she'd been a legacy guest since 1994. I drained my liquidity. I leveraged every asset I had. I spent late nights on encrypted Zoom calls with hotel architects and forensic accountants. I moved with the silence of a predator. By the time we arrived for this year's retreat, I wasn't just a guest. I was the landlord. The first night of the retreat felt like a funeral I was the only one invited to. We were gathered in the resort's private dining hall, a room filled with the scent of pine and privilege. "Honestly, the service is slipping," Lauren said, tossing her linen napkin onto the table. "The new management is clearly incompetent. I had to wait 10 minutes for a towel at the pool today." 10 minutes. Ben's uncle, Ron chimed in. I heard some tech corporation bought the place. No soul anymore. It used to be about the families. Now it's just numbers on a spreadsheet. I sat at the end of the table, stirring my coffee, watching the steam rise. I thought about the moldy AC units I'd just replaced in their cabins. I thought about the lake filtration system I'd authorized, the one the previous owners had ignored for a decade. I thought about the fact that I had just given the resort staff their first significant raise in 5 years. What do you think, Nina? Darlene asked, her voice dripping with mock sweetness. You're an engineer. You like spreadsheets. Do you think a faceless corporation can ever understand the prestige of a place like this? I looked her dead in the eye. I think a corporation understands what it owns, Darlene. And I think prestige is a very expensive illusion. She laughed, a sharp, brittle sound. Oh, Nina, you've always been so pragmatic. Ben, you really should take her to Europe this fall. She needs to see what real culture looks like. Ben squeezed my hand. Maybe next year, Mom. Nina's been very busy with her computers. I felt a chill go through me that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. He didn't even know what I did. He didn't know I had spent the last 6 months saving the very roof over his head. The next day, the napkin incident happened. Darlene was hosting a legacy tea for the other elite families at the resort. She saw me walking through the lobby and snapped her fingers. Nina, there you are. We're short on napkins and the service bell isn't working. Be a dear and run to the pantry. You know where it is, don't you? You're always in the kitchen anyway. I stood there, looking at her hand, the pearls on her wrist, the manicured nails that had never done a day's hard labor. I looked at the lobby I had paid to renovate. I looked at the staff who were now my employees. Of course, Darlene, I said quietly. I went to the pantry. I grabbed the napkins. And then I called Ethan, the property manager. Ethan, I said, my voice shaking with a sudden, violent clarity. Move the announcement up. Tonight, during the annual legacy dinner. Are you sure, Ms. Caldwell? We were going to wait for the press release on Monday. I'm sure. I want them to hear it while they're eating the dinner I paid for. The annual legacy dinner was the highlight of the Caldwell social calendar. Everyone was dressed in their resort chic best. Darlene was in the center of the room, holding court, talking about how the Caldwell name was synonymous with Lake Tahoe. I wore a simple navy sheath dress. No pearls, no diamonds. Just a watch that cost more than their Teslas, though they would never recognize it. Ethan stepped to the microphone at the front of the room. The chatter died down. Good evening, everyone, Ethan began. As many of you know, this year marks a significant transition for the Clear Pines Resort. We have officially moved under the umbrella of Clear Pines Hospitality Group. Tonight, we are honored to introduce our new majority owner, whose vision will guide the resort into the next decade. The room was silent. I could see Lauren leaning in, likely expecting a man in a suit to walk through the doors. Darlene had a smug smile on her face, ready to charm whoever the new king was. Please welcome, Ethan continued, Miss Nina Caldwell. I didn't rush. I walked slowly from the back of the room. The sound of my heels on the hardwood floor felt like a countdown. Lauren's fork hit her plate with a clatter. Haley's mouth fell open. But it was Darlene's face that I'll never forget. The color didn't just drain from her skin. It evaporated. She looked at me, then at Ben, then back at me. Wait, she whispered, her voice cracking. Ha, you, that's impossible. I reached the podium and took the microphone. I didn't look at the crowd. I looked at the table where my family sat, the people who had treated me like an interloper for 11 years. I know there's been a lot of talk about the faceless corporation that bought this place, I said, my voice echoing through the hall. But I assure you, I have a very clear face. And I have been watching. For 10 years, I have watched how this resort was run. I've watched how you treated the staff. I've watched how you assumed your name gave you a right to the air we breathe. I paused, letting the silence settle like a weight. Starting tomorrow, the Caldwell legacy discount is officially terminated. The private wings you've been using for free will be open to the public at market rates. And the backdoor bookings, those are gone, too. From now on, you are guests, just like everyone else. And if you have a complaint about the service, you can leave it with me. The night was far from over. I didn't retreat to my room. I went to my office, the real office, the one the previous owners used. Within an hour, the request started. Lauren came first. She didn't knock. She burst in, her face red. Nina, what the hell was that? You're making us look like fools. Do you have any idea what people are saying? I imagine they're saying I'm the owner of a $50 million property. Lauren, I said, not looking up from my laptop. You can't do this. I have my cabin booked for the entire month of August. I've already promised it to my friends. The cabin you've been illegally subletting for $4,000 a week. I asked, sliding a folder across the desk. My legal team did a deep dive into the books. Lauren, you've been using a family perk to run an unregistered business on my property. That's a violation of the resort's charter. You're not just losing the cabin, you're being billed for the back taxes and the resort's cut of that revenue. If you don't pay, I'll take it to the board. She stayed at the folder, her hands shaking. You're a monster. No, I said. I'm an engineer. I'm just fixing a flaw in the system. Then came Uncle Ron. He tried the friendly approach. Nina, listen. We've had our differences, but surely we can work something out about the boat slip. I've had my Chris-craft there since '98. The slip is now reserved for the resort's new youth sailing program. Ron, I'm sure you can find a public marina in Reno. It's only a 40-minute drive. But the final boss was Darlene. She didn't storm in. She walked in with a grace that was entirely performative. She sat in the chair across from me and smoothed her skate. Nina, she said softly, I suppose I owe you an apology. I clearly underestimated your ambition. But let's be practical. If you do this, if you humiliate us like this, Ben will never forgive you. You're destroying his family. Ben's family destroyed itself, Darlene. You just didn't notice because I was the one holding the pieces together. I settled 3 harassment claims last month. 3 employees you screamed at, called slow, and threatened to fire because your eggs were cold. I paid for their silence. I fixed your mess, but I'm not doing it anymore. I handed her a second envelope. This is a formal ban from the resort's private club. You're welcome to stay in the standard rooms, provided you pay the full rate. But if I hear one report of you mistreating a member of my staff again, I will release the statements from those housekeepers. And I don't think your social club in Seattle would appreciate hearing how you treat the help. She looked at me, and for the first time in 10 years, she didn't see a girl she could step on. She saw a woman who could end her. The most painful part wasn't the confrontation with Darlene. It was the walk back to our suite. Ben was standing on the balcony, looking out at the water. The moonlight caught the silver in his hair. He looked older, tired. Why didn't you tell me, Nina? He asked. His voice wasn't angry. It was hollow. I tried, Ben. I tried to talk to you about the acquisitions. I tried to show you the blueprints for the rail projects. I tried to tell you how much I was making. But every time I started, you'd tell me how cute it was that I was so dedicated to my computer stuff. You never saw me. You saw a wife-shaped object that made your life easier. I loved you, he said. You loved the peace I provided. You loved that I was the one who handled the bills, the gifts, the parties, and the drama, all while you focused on your brilliant research. You loved that I was quiet. But the quiet is over, Ben. What happens now? Now, I said, I'm staying here. I have a resort to run. And you should probably go back to Seattle. Your mother is going to need someone to drive her to her posture classes. I hear the public ones are quite crowded. It's been 6 months since that night in Tahoe. The resort has never been more successful. We've replaced the legacy elitism with a culture of genuine service and community. The youth sailing program is thriving. The staff is the highest paid in the region. And me? I no longer slouch. I no longer hide. I sat on the dock this morning with a cup of coffee, watching the sun hit the Sierra Nevadas. I thought about the girl who used to cry in the shower so her husband wouldn't hear her. I thought about the woman who was told she'd never be one of us. They were right. I'll never be one of them. I'm something much more dangerous. I'm the woman who built the world they were just living in. If you're listening to this, and you're the one who always brings the salad, the one who always clears the table, the one who stays quiet to keep the peace, stop. The peace isn't worth your soul. Build your war chest. Learn the system. And when the time is right, show them exactly who owns the room. Because strength isn't just surviving the storm. It's realizing you are the one who controls the wind. If this story stirred something inside you, don't scroll away in silence. Tap like. It tells us these stories deserve to be told. Subscribe to Vengeful Goddess for unforgettable tales of betrayal, resilience, and justice. Stories you won't hear anywhere else. Turn on the bell icon so the next story reaches you the moment it drops.